Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Hello. How we doing? I got to tell you, how many times was I grateful today? At least 4. How many horsemen were there? 4. How many teams do we ultimately care about in the NCAA tournament? Like, when does it actually start to matter? The final 4. Oh, and by the way, in case you missed it, where will your Philadelphia Flyers enter the draft lottery this year? 4! They did it! They almost did it. They almost blew it, and Brad Shaw challenged a goal, and there was one called back for goaltender interference, and oh my God, I have never in my life gotten to the end of an NHL game and been so unbelievably relieved at the end. I said horrible, horrible things while watching that game in my living room last night. My wife, God love her, she was, I don't even remember, she might have been like doom scrolling or something, just sitting, no, she was doing her nails. She was doing some, she does like this thing with her nails that I don't understand. It's like a powder thing, and there's like this, and then just, I don't get it. But her nails look great, and they're very like festive for Easter. But anyway, I'm like losing my mind watching the Flyers on Thursday night. And I didn't want to be insane, and I didn't want to feel like I was crazier than normal, but like, we got to a point on Thursday night where I'm like, listen, I get it. We've talked about this a lot. You can't tell players to lose. You can't tell coaches to lose. Totally get it. We've litigated that quite a few times on this show. But when you get late into that game and the Flyers broadcast is showing like, hat trick alert, Matvei Michkov. I'm like, we love Matvei Michkov. Don't you dare get a hat trick. We're like, oh, there are other good things that are happening. Tyson Forster scores a goal. Oh, great. Yeah. Alexei Kolosov gives up 3 goals in the first period, and you go, I see that instead of sexy Alexei, we're getting the Cola sieve. In a lot of holes, things just kind of flow through. The Cola sieve is here. And then there are moments in this game where he like kind of stood on his head. He faced a barrage of shots. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Alexei Kolosov looked great. And I somewhat jokingly put out on Twitter, although many people took it very seriously, that when they made the change from Fedotov to Kolosov, I tweeted, oh, great. You're giving the one guy who believes that he's playing for his job in the league next year or trying to play for a spot on some team next year, you're putting him in net. Great. Because in fairness, if you've been a Flyers fan for a long time, you kind of know the way that last night was supposed to go. The way that last night was supposed to go is all the fans walk into the game saying, oh boy, just go lose the game, just go lose the game. But every Flyers fan knows in the back of their head, they're going to fucking blow it. They're going to fucking blow it. And when NBC Sports Philly puts the thing up, I couldn't believe how early they did this too. It was like they were listening to me. It's like they knew what I was there for and what most of the people watching the game were there for. They have the scenarios. Oh, here's what happens if the Flyers win the game. Bad. Here's what happens if the Flyers lose in overtime. Still bad. Here's what happens if the Flyers lose in regulation. Oh, yes! It would be a wonderful treat on a Thursday. And then they showed again late in the game. And I swear to you, in the midst of all the profanities that were leaving my mouth, I almost felt like I was speaking in tongues. It was like profanity-riddled speaking in tongues, watching as the Flyers looked dangerous. I watched the Rocky Thompson horror show score a power play goal. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I didn't know what to do with anything. But I'm watching this game unfold, and I'm going, the guys they're trying. And I'm like, we all know kind of like what the best thing was draft-wise. But I'm like, you got to give the guys credit. And we can do it today because the Flyers ultimately lose in regulation, and they're going to get that number 4 spot in the draft lottery, and then we see where the ping pong balls go. But you can look at that game last night and say they had every reason to just be like mentally checked out and like going to Cancun or whatever. And they didn't. They fought hard. Now, do you give the tip of the cap to the culture that John Tortorella instilled over his years as the coach of this team? Is it the culture that remained with Brad Shaw, who definitely looks like an illegitimate brother of Keith Jones? Like, I know I've joked about that before, but like, you watch Brad Shaw on the bench, you're like, did did Jonesy get a haircut? Like, what? They definitely are probably related. Maybe, okay? But you have to say that, like, last night's game, the team played hard. And listen, I will try to, like, live in the optimistic side of things, right? With Tyson Forster, you saw a guy who over the last, 2 weeks of the season really seemed to find some level of comfort and start to put the puck in the back of the net. And I do understand they faced some backup goalies. They faced some teams that were essentially out of the playoffs. They faced a few teams, in fairness, that were actively still fighting for a playoff spot, like Columbus was, like Montreal was. So it's not like they fought against a bunch of other bottom-feeding teams the entire time, right? There is something kind of encouraging about the fact that over the last couple of weeks, or if you want to go post-firing of John Tortorella, this team, for better or worse, and I'd argue now, for better, just because of where they finished, for better, they didn't fall on their faces. They actually kind of picked themselves up. They dusted themselves off, and they can probably feel somewhat proud of the results going into the offseason. Now, in fairness, was it ever really in play for them to get to the number 3 spot in the draft lottery? No, not really. I don't think that was ever truly in play. I mean, listen, Chicago was Shitcago all year. San Jose was San No Way all year. Nashville, they were running from the Predators rather than being them themselves. They were the prey. They were the Nashville prey this season. So I didn't think that the Flyers were ever going to really get to number 3. But getting to number 4, I think is almost like it's a consolation prize of sorts for Flyers fans everywhere. Because in fairness, if you're a Flyers fan who's stuck with this team, and I always feel bad for the people who only watch one sport, but like if you are only a Flyers fan, you don't care about the Eagles or the Phillies or the Sixers or the Union or anything else, and this is your one team every year, I feel bad for you. But the good news is you've at least been rewarded with what should be a really good player coming out of the draft. Regardless of where the ping pong balls go, you're going to finish in the top 6, which means, in theory, you're going to get one of that top tier, that top 6 player tier. And you should feel good about that. Because, I don't know, is this karmic payback for the Cutter Gauthier thing not working out? Is this karmic payback for Nolan Patrick not working out? Like, I don't know. And listen, there are a whole bunch of pundits that are going to weigh in here with who's going to go number 1. It seems like Schaefer right now kind of plugs in as the best player in the draft. He's a defenseman. If you're the Flyers and you somehow win this draft, you do need a 1C, but do you pass up on a guy who very much is projecting to be a number 1 defenseman? I'd go with the number 1 defenseman. I know that might not be popular, but like I think you kind of go best player in the draft. This team has a lot of holes. They need a 1C, a 1D, and a 1G. So whichever one you end up getting in this draft, if you can get any of them, that is a positive. And you're going to pick in the higher end of this draft. Once again, pair that guy with Matvei Michkov and hopefully believe that you have the building blocks of what could be a contending team that's not just going to be a bubble playoff team for the next 6 years. You want to have that team, that belief that you have the cornerstone pieces to build around that not only are going to, in their own right, become stars or superstars, but are going to be so intriguing that when this team is able to go out and maybe sign an offer sheet for an RFA, or maybe try to go out in unrestricted free agency, probably in 2026 when they have more money and there are better names available, maybe that's when you're able to get a guy that hadn't previously considered Philadelphia. They go, oh, I can go play with Matvei Michkov. I can go play with a guy who has 40-plus goal upside. I can go play with whoever this draft pick ends up being. And then you kind of pair that with Konechny is still a guy that's liked and is a guy that can perform. You look at, again, it's kind of difficult to do this, but you can look at Forsters and Brinks and maybe Tippett if the gods be good, maybe Tippett bounces back next year. There are players on this team that could be intriguing to play with. And by the way, like even though Sean Couturier is not a 1C anymore, although he has looked better since the firing of Torts, and he is coming off 2 back surgeries, and that is going to take a long time to kind of get back from, he's still not nothing. He's still a good locker room dude. He's still a guy who goes out and gives it his all. He's still a guy that is going to be a mainstay of this team. That contract is untradeable. So, like, he's going to be here. And there's still value to that player. Again, it might not be as a 1C, but certainly as a guy who You would want to imagine it's going to take a Jetlichenko under his wing. And if you get a center in this draft, he's going to put that guy under his wing as well. That's a good thing. And again, it's a good locker room presence. That's not a toxic individual. That's a highly respected player. You put all that together and you say, you know what? Maybe this thing can turn around a little bit faster than you expect. Now, this should be very well known at this point. I am not a fan of gaslighting your fans into believing that the team is better than they are, and then you build what is a playoff bubble team, and then you're stuck in hockey purgatory every year. I've been very much against that. I've now been down around or covering the Flyers for, I think this was my 7th season, right? In some capacity. They've missed the playoffs for 5 years in a row. I haven't gotten to actually go down and cover a very good team since there was the weird little bubble tournament where the Flyers in a round robin ended up being the number 1 seed in the East. That was dumb. That team prior to the bubble, they were playing really well, and there was a thought that maybe they were going to end up in the top half of the Eastern Conference. But, for the most part, I haven't gotten to cover a good team. And so the idea here of seeing those building blocks and seeing some of these young guys take a step, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that now all of a sudden, because Tyson Forster ended the season on a stronger note, that means he's going to somehow become a 35-goal scorer next year. I'm not going to tell you that this was just a one-off down year for Owen Tippett, but next year he's going to be a 30-goal scorer. There are questions I have around his game. But I can tell you that I think that where this team is right now is in an exponentially better position than they were even 3 years ago, right? You're not trying to plug and play. Cam Atkinson, really good guy. Didn't perform particularly well once he was here. Most people thought that he was kind of past the prime of his career. You're not going out and acquiring those kind of players now in an effort to save your GM's job. You're not looking to make a deal for a one-year player in a Matt Niskanen who walked away, who retired, and Chuck Fletcher could never convince to come back. You're not trying to take what is potentially a risky move in a Ryan Ellis that had some injury concerns and, for better or worse, you thought was going to be healthy and certainly was not. You don't have to make those moves right now to try to save the front office, because whether you like it or not, this front office is safe. This front office is being given an actual opportunity to try to have a vision and build off of it. Now, I would argue that might have been hampered or might have been hindered a little bit by John Tortorella's presence and the fact that ownership really liked him. But now, going into this offseason, you have Danny Briere really in charge and Keith Jones there in support. But you have those two that now get to go out and hire a coach, and that gets to kind of dictate what's going to happen this offseason. And they're going to be the ones leading that charge. Now, will the new coach have input? Of course. But this to me isn't the start of the Danny Briere. But for once, it actually kind of feels like he's going to be able to build this team how he wants to. This is the most important offseason in his career as an executive, and I'd argue this might be the most important offseason that the Flyers have had in a very, very long time. In a really long time. They have to get this right. And it certainly helps that you have 3 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks. I would not expect them to use all 7 of those picks this year. Is it possible that the Colorado pick or the Edmonton pick maybe get punted to 2026? Maybe there's a team that wants to sneak back into the end of the first round, and you get what could ultimately be a more valuable pick in 2026 just because there's a team that's really infatuated with a guy late in this round? Maybe. Again, you're kind of going off of more than a year from now, but a lot of scouts and pundits seem to believe that the 2026 draft could have some higher-end players. You're not going to be able to trade the Edmonton and or Colorado pick to a team that's going to have a top 5 pick next year. That won't happen. But it's all about evaluating what you think your team's holes are, deciding if whether or not picking at the end of the first round this year makes sense, or do you punt it a year? Do you package 1 or 2 of those late first-round picks and maybe some of those second-round picks and go out and get a guy who could be a more consistent center? And I brought this up on Wednesday's show. I think the number 1 priority right now, if you are the Philadelphia Flyers, has to be, how do we get a center here that can play with Matvei Michkov and can unlock Matvei Michkov and be the guy who centers Matvei Michkov for the majority of a season? How do you get that guy? It doesn't have to be the long-term, 8-year, 10-year 1C. That doesn't necessarily have to happen right now. Get him somebody who is better than Morgan Frost, better than the current version of Sean Couturier. better than a Noah Cates. Go out and get a guy that can unlock Michkov, because if you get that guy, it's going to pay massive dividends. Now, again, ideally, Jetlashenko makes the team coming out of camp because he earns it. And maybe he and Michkov play together. They build chemistry and they work really well together. Maybe you are able to get a center in this draft. From everybody that I talk to who actually watches and keeps up with all of these prospects that are going to go in the top 6, no one seems to believe that any of the forwards that are going to be taken in the first 6 picks, that any of those 5, plus Schaefer the defenseman, nobody seems to believe that any of those forwards are going to make a team out of camp next year and be a difference maker. Is it possible that one of these guys really impresses out of camp and makes the jump to the NHL next year? Possibly. Would I put a ton of money on it? No. And if a guy does make the team, I'm not exactly sure that they're going to be an impact player. There's not a Connor Bedard that slots right in. There's not a Connor McDavid, a Sidney Crosby, an Alex Ovechkin that comes right into the lineup and makes a difference from game 1. So, all of that is to say, it is a massive offseason for this team. And I put a few questions into the comments over on YouTube and on Facebook earlier. I asked 3 questions of Flyers fans, and I wanted to get the general sentiment of the people who watch this show, on YouTube, Facebook, and X, and just get a better feel overall for if you're happy. So the 3 questions were as follows. Let me pull it up over here. I said the 3 questions. Number 1, then this is if you're a Flyers fan. I want you to kind of internalize this. Certainly drop them in the comments if you're watching live, or if you watch after the fact or whatever, you can leave it in the regular comments. But number 1, prior to the season, would you have been happy with the Flyers getting the number 4 spot in the draft lottery, which is not the draft, it's the draft lottery. 4th best chance of getting up to the number 1 overall pick, guaranteeing yourself a top 6 pick in case 2 teams jump over top of you, okay? So would you have been happy with the number 4 spot in the draft lottery? Question number 2, who would you want at number 4 if you are to remain at number 4? And then question number 3, do you want the team to push for the playoffs next year in the 2025-2026 season or tank for Gavin McKenna? Now, the problem, of course, is that even if you finish with the worst record in hockey, you're looking at a 20-ish% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. I do not believe that the Flyers are going to actively try to be bad next year. I do not get the feeling that the Flyers are going to run it back with the same roster. In fairness, if you go back to what the team ended with last year, and then you take a look at what the team started with this year, Danny Briere didn't make a lot of moves. And it was pretty clear from the get-go that this team was going to probably play better than their talent should because John Tortorella raises your floor. But they weren't going to be a team that was going to shockingly get into the playoffs. They were going to be a team that was going to end up in the lottery again. All right, well, Torts is gone, so the guy who lowers your floor is gone. Could they extend Bradshaw? And could Bradshaw have them in the same spot next year or somewhere in the draft lottery next year? Sure. It's possible that Bradshaw is actually a better coach and that some of the winning that they did post-Torts was actually showing that the players believe in the guy and that they can play a very similar system under Shaw that they did with Torts, but maybe with a little bit less brashness, maybe a little bit less mind games. Maybe. And if that's the case, could this be a bubble playoff team with the same roster next year? I'd say not a playoff team with the goalies that they have currently. Could they push for a playoff spot with most of the same roster next year? If you got a better netminder in to play as like the lead guy? Maybe. But again, is that what you want? I just don't see them tanking a season for McKenna. Now, if they try to improve this roster and then they're just hit with a ton of injuries and they end up in a spot where like things are kind of falling apart, all right, well, cool. Like maybe a neat byproduct of that is you get the generational talent in McKenna. But I could not tell you in strong enough words that if your hope is that the Flyers are going to actively tank for Gavin McKenna next year, you are getting your hopes up for something that will never happen, okay? So just level set that right now. They are not going to tank for Gavin McKenna. I would love to be wrong. Well, actually, no. I want to see the team be good. I do. If you could guarantee me Gavin McKenna, sure. Fine. Burn one more sip. What's another year? But you can't. But I know that there are people out there who want to see them burn a year for Gavin McKenna. So I'm going to go out to the comments. I'm going to bring it back around because there are a couple of things that I want to touch on from last night's game. And then just kind of hit on one or two other Flyers-related things before we head into the weekend. And by the way, it's Good Friday. I sometimes make the joke, although I was once told that it's kind of sacrilege. But I was like, oh, you know what? It's Good Friday. but maybe if we have a nice time together, we can make it a great Friday. But then I was told that it's sacrilege and it's not exactly great, so I shouldn't say that. So I'm not going to say that, but I'm just saying that maybe at one point in my life, I maybe made that reference, but we're not going to go. It's a Good Friday. Easter's on Sunday. WrestleMania starts on, oh, that's right. See, I was wearing this hoodie because I was on a meeting. And I was on like a somewhat important meeting, and I was like, oh, I don't want to look like a total schlub. It's WrestleMania weekend, which means I am supporting pro wrestling this weekend. And as you can see, I've got the Austin 316. And my wife said, why are you wearing Austin 316? And then I hit her with the old King of the Ring thing that like kind of started Stone Cold, where he says to Jake the Snake, what was it? You always talk about your scripture, you talk about your John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says, I just whipped your ass. I think it just kind of seemed fitting. Anyway, we're going to go out to the comments, and then we'll reconvene with a few other thoughts. Zach O is here, says, oh, yes. Superfan Eric, also known as the Concerned Fan, over on YouTube says, Flyers will probably fall to the 5th overall pick. I hope that Frondel is still on the board. Good chance. Also says, I hope both the Avs and Oilers lose in the first round. Listen, I'm 100% with Superfan Eric. 100%. We do not cheer for Colorado or Edmonton. Early, disappointing playoff exits are great for the Flyers. They own both of those picks. I would much rather those picks be in the high 20s than the low 20s, right? We cheer in this household and in your households everywhere that the Avs and the Oilers are early playoff outs. I don't think they will be, but we cheer for that nevertheless. Chris Freed says, had the chance to have lunch with a history professor from college this week. Russ, which former professor would you want to have lunch with? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I have a very, I don't want to say this the wrong way. What's the way that I say this? And not much of a, so despite the fact that I was a Spanish and German major, I didn't have much of a relationship with a lot of my professors because some of them were just insufferable human beings. I had one professor in college that was absolutely horrific, like awful. And everybody who was in that major, it's one of the languages, and it's probably not Spanish. Everybody that majored in that language wanted to switch because of this one professor. And yet, most of the classes I took were with this one professor. So it would not be with her. Did I have any Spanish professors that I really... You know what? There was a guy who was in charge of the language department when I was there, who I did an independent study of a Spanish literature course with, Dr. Williams. He was awesome. He was a supportive guy. I somehow talked him into like figuring out a way to offer an Italian minor at Westchester. So if you're ever at Westchester University and you see the Italian minor, yours truly was part of getting that offered. Now I had an Italian professor. I don't know if she's still there. Chicheri. She was great. I'd probably get lunch with her or Dr. Williams. I had a Spanish phonetics professor, San Sanchez. He was cool. He was a good guy. I wasn't exactly the most fun student to have all the time. I'd probably catch up with him. Good dude. I had some good music professors in college. There was Yos and Dr. Martin, who oversaw the marching band and a bunch of the different bands there. I had an English professor, Konigsberg. She was great. I don't know. Like some people, when they get out of college, they're like, oh, I have like these four mentors. I have this mentor, these two mentors that I go back to. We talk about my life and my career and all that. I didn't have that. And it was okay. So, I don't know. I don't totally have that. And it's okay. And in fairness, it's funny. I got asked last year, I think, by Westchester University. They were like, oh, the College of Arts, I think it was, right, where languages fall under. And they're like, which professor do you want to have interview you to like kind of update like where I'm at in life? And I was like, can I have Josviak, the director of bands, do it? And that's what I ended up doing. So, Chris, very interesting question. Also, Chris, we'll make this announcement over on Snow the Goalie, but you also won the predictions contest among fans, and you have a very cool prize that's going to be coming your way. So, Chris, do me a favor. Either shoot me an email or a DM on Instagram or Twitter I need your address, and I'll ship it out on like through UPS or something. But you have a victory prize coming your way for winning the predictions contest over on Snow the Goalie. I'll announce on that show, like what the prize is. But anyway, that was a good question. Landros 2 says some lottery luck would be nice, but even still, the top 6 is pretty good. Last night's loss was big for the organization. Yeah, because I mean, listen, I got into this with people. I've been getting into this with people for weeks, right? And I've been getting into it with one of my co-hosts over on Snow the Goalie very often about it. But it's like finishing at number 4 in the draft lottery means that the worst you could get is 6. And like, listen, you might have a really tough call there with McQueen, who has legitimate injury issues, but is a big-bodied dude and could potentially be a long-term 1C for you, could be the solution. But the injury concerns are what is going to probably have him tumble down some teams' draft boards. So I'd rather still have that option than hit that next tier of players where a lot of people say number 7 through like 21 are the same level of player. So the Flyers, if nothing else, are going to end up with one of those guys. It's just a matter of, are you going to get a position of need, center? Could you win the whole thing and maybe get Schaefer and get that guy who projects to be a number 1 defenseman? Do you end up with a wing? And by the way, that's not a bad thing if you end up with a wing that has legitimate scoring potential. So still good stuff. Chris Freed says the Flyers have now reached the status that a sad loss to end a terrible year is considered good news. After 5 years without the playoffs, this is what we fans consider hope. Hope is a dangerous thing. Oh, that was Shawshank Redemption. Hope is a dangerous thing. Okay, going back out here really quickly. Joe Papel says too much celebrating the 4th place draft position last night. I disagree. There wasn't a lot to cheer for this year. By the way, Matvei Michkov leading the league among rookies with goals, 26 goals. Good on him. Forget what the stat was from. I think it was a Bill Meltzer tweet. I think it was that he's the first rookie forward for the Flyers since like Renberg in 92-93 to score 25 plus goals in a season, which is insane. Yeah, he's only the 4th rookie in Flyers history who at age 20 or younger on NHL opening night went on to score 25 plus goals in his rookie season. The others were Lindros, Brian Propp, and Bill Barber. There was a thing going around about Renberg. I don't remember what the stat was, but it was like another impressive thing. Maybe it was taking the age 20 on opening night qualifier out of it, but still really, really wild. Mind Munchies YouTube says, do you think the Flyers will go all in and try to draft Matthew Schaefer? I don't know what all in looks like. You're not going to be able to move up to number 1 from like number 4, even if you offer the Edmonton pick and the Colorado pick. Whoever ends up with the number 1 pick is probably going to take Schaefer. I don't see any team saying, yeah, you know, those 2 later first-round picks are enough to move back 3 or 4 spots. If he's there at number 1, I think you're in a really hard position there. Because, again, from the people that I've talked to, Schaefer is like kind of in his own league right now among these prospects. Then 2 through 6 is around here, and then 7 through 21 is here. If Schaefer is truly the best guy on the board by a pretty considerable margin, that's the guy you go with. Let's see. Joe Papel says, no shot at the playoffs next year, Russ. Danny's not going to find a 1C, 1D, and 1G this summer. No point in doing a Fletcher mort to get mired in mediocrity. I do not think, and this is actually a good point, but this is where I will give Briere credit, and I've talked to Briere about this at least once or twice this year. I don't think Briere is going to patchwork this thing for fun. Because, again, I think he's got a longer leash than your typical, like, third-year GM, right? I think that he is going to be given enough rope here that he can get a guy on a short-term deal, but he isn't going to feel the need to take on bad money to get a mediocre at best player to try to make a playoff push. He'll make a deal if it makes sense. I don't see him making stupid decisions that are going to long-term hurt the team because he feels like he needs to make the playoffs or he's going to lose his job, if that makes sense, which makes him kind of the opposite of Fletcher. All right, now go back to the 3 questions that I had. Number 1, would you have been happy with number 4 in the draft lottery at the beginning of the year? 2, who would you draft it for? 3, do you want the team to push for the playoffs next year or tank for McKenna? So we're going to get to some of those people now. Landros 2 says, yes, would have been happy with number 4. Frondel or Matrone, assuming Schaefer and Misa are gone. And then question number 3, the question on next year really needs the offseason to play out. And I understand the logic there, and I understand why somebody might feel that way. But I don't see them tanking. Let's see. Chris Freed says at the beginning of the year he would not have been happy, or says I have no clue. Oh, okay. So no, would not have been happy with number 4 in the draft lottery. Question number 2, not sure, hasn't seen any of the prospects play. 3, doesn't think that this franchise and front office can survive a 6th straight season without the playoffs. They can. They will. If they miss the playoffs again, they will still survive. Video guy Amadeus here says Danny and Jonesy will survive. Okay. A-Dub says tank or don't tank. I really don't care. Just keep maximizing assets and set a roadmap. Again, I think that the Flyers are in a position now, for once, where there is a pretty clear path. They didn't make stupid patchwork moves at the trade deadline to try to add. And even going back to last year, they traded Walker, who was arguably their best defenseman. They traded him to pick up a first-round draft pick because they knew that patchwork additions at the deadline didn't make a lot of sense because it was going to hurt the long-term prospects of this team. So I do think that there is a roadmap that has been laid out. Joe Papel says, do not push for the playoffs. First, there's no way the Flyers can pass 8 teams in the standings. I disagree. In one offseason, Flyers are still paying Hayes, D'Angelo, and Ellis because of Fletcher Mort faux pas. The latter point there is true. Chris says, if Danny and Jonesy select Rick Tocchet, I'm off the bandwagon. That will not end well. And when it fails, the entire front office should go along with Tocchet. Here's the thing with that. And I kind of touched on this the other day. Tocchet still could end up back in Vancouver. Tocchet would not necessarily be a shoo-in for the job here, although I think he'd have better odds than not of getting hired. My concern is he's 61. He's made the playoffs twice in his career. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad coach. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying if he's going to get paid $5 million or more and end up somewhere in the top 5 or so of highest paid coaches in the league and doesn't have a playoff track record to show for it, that to me is a concern. If you think that he's going to be the guy who can get the most out of younger players and truly develop them, and you want to point to, 8 different players that he's helped to elevate their respective games over the years, cool. If you can't do that, then I say, it probably doesn't make sense. Josh White over on YouTube says, Hagens or Frondel would be ideal at number 4. Let's see. Chris Freed says the Flyers should contend for the playoffs if the draft picks from last few drafts are being developed. If they are not, again, that is a bigger problem with the organization that is not getting fixed. Correct. Max Miller says, I keep going back and forth between Hagens and Frondel at number 4. I feel Hagens is the more dynamic of the two, but Frondel's bigger, and his shot and IQ are elite. Either would be great with Michkov. I agree with that. Now, in fairness, I haven't done a lot of film analyzing on any of these guys, right? I think either on this show or Snow the Goalie or both, I'll have a few people come on that have been watching these guys all year that can provide some actual insight to all of you fine people. And in the meantime, I am actually going to go back and try to get as much film as I can. Obviously, it's going to maybe matter a little bit more once we know the Flyers' actual draft position, but still, I think it's kind of notable. It's pretty important. Let's see. Mind Munchies said we'll be able to get a first-line center and a future first-line defenseman later in the draft. That one's kind of tricky. The future first-line defenseman, I'm not exactly sure about that. Could they use one of those later picks on a defenseman if they get a forward high in the draft? Yes. Tony Louie says, we did it! We did it! We finally had a successful tank. I'm so happy right now. Crying face. Getting a high first-line center is going to do wonders for this franchise. We weren't going anywhere without one. Play this one out. If the Flyers end up with a center, right? And if this organization believes in Lushenko the way that they seem to, and they have Sean Couturier, and they have Noah Cates, who they really do believe could be either the 3rd or 4th line center, it would kind of be nice to be sort of set up the middle and at least be able to kind of evaluate that. Now, again, I don't think if they get a forward in this draft, that guy's going to make the roster out of camp next year and be a difference maker. So, be very careful there. You would probably in that scenario have Couturier still slotted in as your 1C. Maybe then Lushenko's your 2C. And if somehow a guy that you draft impresses out of camp and he comes in and he could be your 3C, I guess, and then Cates moves down to 4C. But do you want that young player to be the 3C? I don't know. The big thing here is you can't rush whoever you take. Don't risk stunting their development because you feel like you need that guy to be on the team right out of camp. And again, I don't think that this franchise is going to do that. You look at how they tempered expectations around Michkov going into this year. I don't think they're going to try to force the issue. Lushenko made the team out of camp due in large part to the fact that Torts really pushed to have the guy on the team. And then when his time was running out, those first 9 games or so, they sent him down because they knew for his development that's where he was better suited. And then they wanted to see him go to the Phantoms here at the end of the year because they wanted to see him help make a push for the Phantoms to make the playoffs and maybe go a little bit deeper. So they had a plan there. They were smart about it. They didn't force the issue and have him up here all year. I would expect the same thing to happen next year with whoever they end up drafting. Amadeo says, I might be in the minority, but I don't understand why the Flyers fans are treating Sean Couturier like he's the next coming of Satan. That's because there are people that, for better or worse, still hold the contract against Couturier, and I don't think it's fair. Remember, listen, even if you want to be the most critical opponent, right, of Chuck Fletcher, he could not have seen 2 back surgeries coming. And you're looking at a guy that was a Selke winner, could be a potential, in fairness, could be like a 25, 30 goal scorer as a center, was a guy who was a very responsible 200-foot player. You don't see 2 back surgeries coming. Now, could you have made the case that signing a guy who was playing in the league since he was 18 and had logged a lot of very difficult minutes for this franchise, could you have argued that a long-term deal based on that didn't make sense? Maybe. Couturier is not a bad guy. That's really important, I think, for people to kind of keep in mind. And it's not like, oh, you're just willing to overlook his shortcomings because he's a nice guy. No, but that actually does have an impact. And in a locker room that has seen a lot of turnover, there is still something valuable in having that guy in Couturier. And by the way, if this team goes out and they get that 1C or they draft a guy that they want to have higher in the lineup, Couturier is not going to be a malcontent playing as a 3C and make it known how much he doesn't want to take somebody under their wing, like Aaron Rodgers, years ago when Jordan Love got taken by the Packers. You're not going to have that. You're going to have a guy who's still going to be supportive, is going to push, and is going to try to be the 1C on this team, but isn't going to actively tank that locker room. That's important. And having a few guys on the team who have the ability to step up when needed and have had the ability and the willingness to put their body on the line for this team, this city, all that, those guys matter. They do. Now, would it be nice if Couturier were making $4 million a year? Sure. That's not the reality of the situation. Are you going to trade him for another bad contract to try to lob a year or 2 off of the end of what you owe to Couturier? No, this organization's not going to do it, and they're smart for not doing it. But that's why people still do it, because they look at the years and they look at the AAV and they've convinced themselves that shitting on Couturier is a good idea. I think that there's also a little bit of residual bitterness that a lot of the Giroux fans felt like this organization squandered a lot of his years, and that when Couturier didn't come in and become the second coming of Giroux, which they're not the same player, they're not even remotely close to the same kind of player, that when he wasn't able to fill those shoes, that all of a sudden people just kind of turned against him. I didn't understand it then. I still don't understand it. Joe Papel says, finishing 8th next year is only achieving hockey purgatory, must still acquire difference-making talent. So he wants the Flyers to finish low again. Like I said, I just don't see it happening. AK40 Kevin says, Flyers are in such a high need of talent that fans wouldn't even be devastated at dropping 2 spots. They'd be disappointed, but not devastated. So if the Flyers in this draft lottery get jumped by 2 teams but still pick at 6, I think you're right. I think that there's a segment of the fan base that's going to feel kind of bummed out if that happens, right? If the Flyers were to drop down to number 6, and like I mentioned, McQueen is there, and he's the ultimate boomer bust guy in this draft class, and you end up with him, fans, I think, will still be excited because of the upside and the potential, and then they're going to be worried until he could show that the injuries aren't that serious or aren't going to be long-term. They're going to be worried, oh no, is this Nolan Patrick again? I would say probably not. And I've heard enough people now speak so highly of the guy and have the belief that the injuries aren't going to be a long-term concern that it's all right, getting a player who still has legitimate upside of being a franchise cornerstone, maybe not the generational talent that a McDavid is or that Bedard was viewed as, but somebody who's legitimate and could help this team long-term, Flyers fans are going to be happy about it. If you had won that game last night and entered the lottery at number 7 and then got dropped down to 8 or something, yeah, fans would have been really upset. And again, they would have had some right to be upset because of the way that this season played out and because it's now 5 years without a playoff appearance. I mean, shit, if you're going to miss the playoffs, at least get somebody who helps your team long term. And it feels like they're very close to that. All right. Let's see. CMZ says, I was literally laughing watching that shit last night. They were trolling us. The Brad Shaw challenge of the challenge late in that game made me scream. The goaltender interference call made me scream. There was also late in that game, I forget who it was from the Sabres, had a breakaway opportunity and got tripped along the wall, and like the refs just missed this call. And the guy goes down. He doesn't end up putting the puck on net because his entire timing was thrown off. But, man, it really did feel like when the Flyers scored that fourth goal late in the game, I was like, oh, man, there's still 5 seconds left, 4 seconds left or whatever. Maybe it was 13. It got down to 4. There were the faceoffs. And I'm like, well, at least the Flyers don't win faceoffs. And then, of course, they're, like, winning every critical faceoff in the last, 45 seconds of the game. Landro says even the announcers wanted them to lose. That was funny. I think that the announcers were kind of in this tough spot where it's like, listen, as a home announcing team, there is a certain amount of homerism that is accepted. And then there's also the nobody likes to go down and watch a team. You don't like to dedicate your time to a team that can't win. But then you watch it last night and you're like, listen, those guys, Jim Jackson and Bush, are probably like, yo, let's be real. Getting a good player in here and like getting to a point where we see winning hockey again for a sustained period of time would be pretty freaking nice. Yeah, okay. And at that point, you're not hiding it. And again, they had the graphic pulled up a few times throughout the game. It was very clear that they were very much in the camp of, losing that one. Amy says, I say this in the nicest possible way. You all need to calm the hell down. No, people are allowed to be excited about what happened last night. They're allowed to be excited about the fact that maybe, just maybe, something good is finally going to happen to this organization. And in fairness, the Michkov falling to number 7, where he probably should have been number 2 had he not been Russian and under contract in the KHL and had the war not been going on over there and the geopolitical concerns, he probably goes number 2 in that draft. He falls to 7. There is a good karmic payback. Maybe we say that's the Nolan Patrick karmic payback, or maybe that's the JVR instead of Patrick Kane payback. I don't know. Landro says, F the culture. They need talent as well. No one will care they lost last night. Yeah, I mean, okay. Superfan Eric says, I was a nervous wreck the last 19 minutes and 45 seconds of the third period last night. Yeah, when they came out and they scored, I was like, oh no, what are we doing here? I think I even tweeted, stop scoring. Just stop. Landro says 7 picks in the top 48. That's some decent ammunition. It is. Again, I just don't think they're going to make all of those picks, and I do expect them to trade at least. I wouldn't be surprised if the Colorado pick gets punted to next year for a first-round pick next year, and that the Edmonton pick, for example, ends up as part of a deal for a roster player. I would not be shocked. I don't think they make 2 picks in the first round. I think it's going to be whoever they get in the top 6. Both of those other picks are going to be moved in separate deals, is my guess. I could be very wrong. We'll see. Joe says Cutter finished with 20 goals. Should have called his bluff. He wasn't saying 3 more years in college. We don't know fully what happened. You'll drive yourself to a point of madness if you kind of play revisionist history or you try to play that one back. Is it a bummer? Yes. Did I think he was going to be a good player? Yes. Did I think he had 30-plus goal upside? Yes. Is it going to kind of suck to watch that from a distance if he does reach whatever his ceiling is and know that you had him in this organization and something happened that led to him not wanting to be here? Yeah. If you get to a point where whoever this guy you get in the draft this year is, right, and it ends up being a forward and that guy becomes a 1C or becomes a winger that can put up 40 goals of his own, and Jamie Drysdale develops into being that QB of the top power play unit and is a solid, legitimate top pair defenseman who is incredibly dynamic and versatile and dangerous on the power play, and you have that guy hit his ceiling in this top 6 pick, whatever it ends up being, that's a pretty good consolation. You probably don't feel nearly as bad at that point. But there is a lot on Drysdale's development to taking the sting out of that. Vineet Singh asks, any thoughts of trying Forster at center? No, I don't have any thoughts of it. Does the organization? I don't know. I haven't gotten the indication that it's something that they would entertain. If they think that there's value to it, like let's say you end up getting a wing in this draft instead of a center, could you see the next coach come in and maybe tinker? Possibly. You'd be kind of doing yourself a disservice not to. Not totally sure, though. Tony Louis says, I'd like to see them trade for a center that has 1 or 2 years left on their deal to help bolster the team until our pick from this year is ready. I think that's fair. I think that is something that Briere will look at. I don't think that he's going to take a bad contract that has like 3 or 4 years on it just to get that player's, I don't know, like good 1 or 2 years, first 2 years of that deal to play with Michkov. I think it has to make sense across the board. Mike Bauer says, anyone else think Boston's crappy season was kind of a fluke and still think they can contend? Wonder if they'd be looking to move that high first for immediate help. I don't know who the Flyers have that Boston would want and would be willing to part with such a high pick for. Like, who's that guy on this team? Does Boston want to trade that pick for Travis Konechny? No. Would the Flyers trade Konechny for another high pick in this draft? Probably not. I don't know who the guy is that you think Boston would want. Like, I don't see a match there. Could it be a match with somebody else? Maybe, but I don't see it. Vineet, going back to the original 3 questions, says, yes, would have been happy with number 4 prior to the year. Once Hagens would just be fun to watch, and says no tanking. There are no unrestricted free agents in the summer of 26 that will want to come to a bottom team. There's a case to be made for that, and there are some very good free agents coming out in 2026. Crimson Cade says, Danny going to wow all of us this coming offseason. These next 2 years will be looked back at as the launching pad to the greatness that's coming down the pike. Crimson Cade, you should clip this part of the episode to remember that you had this prediction. I would love that. It'd be great. I think that between this year and next year, you're right. If they are going to take the next step and be a team that's going to contend for a decade or more, these next 2 off seasons are pretty much it. These are as important as any offseason that I could remember in my lifetime. That's not hyperbole. That is true. Tony Louis says, yes, extremely happy with the result of the season getting the 4th lotto pick. Number 2, would like to see them take Frondel if he's available. And 3, does not want them to tank again. So we're not getting a lot of tank hopes for McKenna in the comments right now. Ammo23 says, during the frantic last few minutes of the game, I thought I was going to have to take Video Amadeo to the ER. Oh, so somebody who was watching with Video Guy Amadeo. Now, Video Amadeo, he was texting me during the game. He was freaking out last night, and I'm pretty sure he survived, so we're good there. Colin Gamble says, how much better could they realistically get in one offseason? Another top 5 pick wouldn't be the worst thing. I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. I think that Briere is going to go, and I think he's going to wheel and deal this offseason. I think that this team is going to compete for a playoff spot. If it doesn't happen, or if there are no good deals to be made, and this organization says, you know what, things didn't develop the way that we wanted them to, we're going to let the young guys develop another year, see where the chips fall, cool. If that's what ends up happening, and they're clear about it, cool, fine. But that has to be, I can't do 2 more seasons of bad. Could I do 1 more season with a realistic shot at McKenna? Maybe. But I do think that they're going to try to make the playoffs, and I think that they're going to make smart moves that are going to push them in that direction. So we'll see. Let's see. Ryan Reese says, kind of want McQueen, to be honest. There is something really special in that player, in that frame. So if you fall to number 6 and he's there, I say I'd rather have the boomer bust guy. And if that means that you end up getting the bust end of that, it would be a shame, and it probably sets your franchise back a bit. But the upside there is gigantic. Let's see. JD says, hopefully they lose in the 1st or 2nd round next year, I guess. Sorry. They both lose in the 1st or 2nd. He's talking about the Edmonton and Colorado getting those picks higher up. C-Max says, Russ, this is the year the Flyers win number 1 pick, and Matthew Schaefer will start day 1 with Sanheim and become our number 1 D. He's the only NHL-ready player. I think that if there's a guy from the top 6 that's going to make a team out of camp next year, Schaefer has the best chance. Would they put him as on the top pair next year? I don't know. I think that you're maybe a little bit worried about developing him properly and that giving him those high leverage minutes and knowing who he's going to be matched up against might be problematic. Could I don't know. We're going back to the question about professors. Josh White said, I would get lunch with my German teacher freshman year. His name was Mr. Joy. Josh, good answer. No bonus points, but good answer. Fragment of the Creator on YouTube, who I haven't seen here before. Hello, Fragment. Thanks for joining us. says the Blackhawks are going to get Schaefer. Maybe. Now, the rule is that you can only pick number 1 twice in a 5-year period. So if that were to happen for Chicago, they would then not be eligible to get McKenna. So if they tank again next year, they end up with Schaefer, they would not be able to get McKenna. So that would be pretty wild. Let's see. What are we? There was like a congratulations thing. I think I missed somewhere over here. Okay. Going to keep going here really quick. Oh, here we go. Stir & Co., who I think is also new. Thanks for finding the show. Subscribe. Like the video, share the video. Subscribe to the channel. Says, what's your thoughts on the goalie situation? Only 2 next season. Yeah. So here's your issue, right? Fedotov has another year left, multi-million-dollar contract. There are some people who believe that Fedotov is just going to go back to Russia. There are people who genuinely believe he's going to go back to Russia. You're not going to have to worry about him next year at the NHL level for whatever that's worth. I don't think that the Flyers are going to start the year with Fedotov on the roster unless, for whatever reason, they run it back again and then they say, Ersson and Fedotov, tank away, baby. So I don't expect Fedotov. The Iron Giant has been a lot of fun, huge body, a lot of intrigue and palace intrigue and all the developments around his career and having to go do the military service and the ill-fated picture and announcement that he had signed when he was still abroad. Not a great time for that. I don't think Fedotov will be back. Kolosov, I don't think he'll be back either. I don't know what that's going to look like. Does he end up back in Belarus? Does he sign with Dynamo Minsk and just go back to playing in the KHL? Does his camp try to get Danny Briere to facilitate a trade to a team that wants to have him as their backup? Based on the body of work this year, almost impossible to imagine a team wants to guarantee him the backup spot. And as I mentioned on Wednesday's show, there seem to be a lot of people around the player who are not happy with the idea of him playing in the AHL. Maybe not the player himself, but other people. And if that's the case, I just don't see another team wanting to guarantee him the backup spot on their team and have to deal with the headache of other forces, being upset about the AHL. So I would imagine that Ersson is back as the backup, and they're going to sign somebody, hopefully to not a lucrative deal, but that they'll sign another goalie to be the lead guy in net next year. That's my guess. That's my hunch. I'm pretty confident. Let's see. Eric asks, maybe move up to number 3. I think he means this year. So there's only one real scenario where the Flyers could end up at number 3. And I think it's Detroit can move up to number 2 because you can only move up as many as 10 spots. So if like a Detroit were to get the number 1 overall pick in the lottery, they can't have number 1. Or no, sorry. Yes, that is correct. So they would have to go up to number 2. And then you would have a drafting, like a drawing would be for the number 3 spot in this draft. And so they would end up potentially, the Flyers, I think, have a 0.5% chance of getting the number 3 overall pick, and that's how it would happen. It would be like Detroit has to get the number 2 pick, then you're doing a lottery for number 1, lottery for number 3. Flyers have a very minimal chance of getting the number 3 spot. So that's practically out of play. You will notice that as people share the percentages, the Flyers have a higher chance of moving down to 5 or down to 6 than they do up to 1. A whole lot of reasons for that. Mainly, there are so many variables here, right? Other teams have a 5%, 6%, 8%, 10%, whatever chance of getting up to the number 1 overall pick, which means if they can jump you, higher percentage that you get shifted down. Math. Okay. Let's see. Colin Gamble says, got to figure one of Risto or York, if not both, is moved this offseason. I would put far more money on them moving York than Risto. The only way that they're going to move Risto is that they have another big-bodied defenseman to take his place. I am very much of the belief that this team is very well aware that you cannot win a cup with as many small defensemen as they have. And between Drysdale, York, and Emil Andre, you ain't winning a cup with that. You ain't. It ain't happening. York is going to ask for more money than he's probably worth. The team's going to have to decide if they want to do a bridge deal at a higher value than they probably should, or do they explore the trade market? If it were me, if I were the Flyers, I would explore the trade market. I really would. I would consider moving young Cam York, but that's just me. I also would be open to trading Risto for whatever it's worth, but I don't think they will. Let's see. Chris Freed says, should note that today in 1987, Michael Jack Schmidt, it is 500th home run in Pittsburgh. Michael Jack Schmidt. Let's see. C-Max said, Friedman this morning on Sirius NHL Radio implied the Flyers' top candidate for head coach is the Western Michigan coach, and then said Vancouver not letting talk it out. Would I be opposed to a college coach coming in here and taking this thing over as part of this building up a young team? No, there's actually good logic in potentially bringing in a guy who knows how to communicate with younger players right now in an ever-evolving league. If you think that he is the best choice, by all means. I don't have the skittishness because it didn't work with Hackstall. You're always going to be able to find a reason to not like the hire. I wouldn't use Hackstall flopping here as reason enough to not consider a college coach getting moved and hired as the head coach here. Olson Math 3141, who I believe is also new to the channel, subscribe. Thank you for being here. Says we need to use one of our second first round picks on the best goalie in the draft. I will tell you that between Zavragan and Bjarnason, they do believe that at least one of those guys is going to become an NHL goalie. Is there anything wrong with adding additional depth at the goalie position? Absolutely not. I don't think that they'll look to pick a goalie late in the first round. But again, that could change. Not a terrible idea. I'm just not entirely sure that that's what's going to happen. Okay, let's see. Not JD says, I really want them to make some offer sheets. They're going to have a bunch of cap space. I would not be surprised if I wouldn't be shocked if they did an offer sheet, but you really have to be convinced that you're not trying to compete next year, or that you're not going to be in the bottom of the draft next year. This is a little bit tricky. There's a little bit more going on there. Dan Streamer, or Strymer, I don't know which way you go with the I before E, says Bradshaw looks like a skinny version of Hank Hill. Was he talking about propane and propane-related accessories on the bench last night? I don't think so. All right, let's see. Not JD says pull up Tankathon. Oh, we don't have to pull up. Well, we could, but we don't have to pull up Tankathon because we're happy the Flyers ended up with the fourth spot in the draft lottery, But fine. I am a man of the people. You ask for it, I will bring it to you. We'll sim it one time. So again, San Jose, Chicago, Nashville, 3 teams with the best odds of getting that number 1 overall pick. Flyers at 9.5% chance. Not terrible. All right, sim it. And in this, they stay. Nashville moves up 1. Chicago moves down 1. So if you end up at number 4, you have a few really good players to choose from. Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to get to? Gerard Dugan asks, resign York or question. I would move him. But that's just me. Chris Fiore asks, any chance McQueen falls due to injury history and Flyers can package picks to move up and grab him in the middle of round 1 after, of course, getting Schaefer when we win the lottery? So, Chris, first of all, thanks for being here. Like the video, share the video, subscribe. I don't think McQueen's going to fall that far. If McQueen falls to number 7, whoever ends up picking at number 7 is going to take him. I think that McQueen only gets as far. If he falls out of the top 6, you might have another team that tries to move up a couple of spots to get him. I would honestly be shocked if he falls to 12. Do you consider moving both of those later first round picks? And something, I don't know how else you get up in that middle of the first round. You don't want to trade your first round pick next year under any circumstances. Now, if you think the McQueen could be a legitimate number 1 center for your team, and you think it's an absolute abomination that he's fallen, and you go, yo, we can get a guy in here who at age 18 is already 6'5" and projects to be a legitimate number 1 center. If you decide that you think that that's going to be better than wherever you're going to pick next year, assume you make the playoffs next year, and you go, all right, we could trade what might be the 24th and the 28th pick in this year's draft between some combination of Colorado and Edmonton, and we're going to trade what's essentially going to be the 20th pick in next year's draft. Do you move all 3 of those picks to go and get McQueen at number 12? Yeah, I would. Sure. At that point, that's pretty easy for me to say, by all means. Because at that point, I'm going, all right, if you get the boomer bust guy, but you get him after he's fallen, cool. Now he's got a chip on his shoulder as well. and you have whatever your top 6 pick ends up being. I just don't see a scenario where that's going to happen. I'd be legitimately shocked if he fell that far. Rora says, what would it take to trade for Bedard if he becomes available? Also, would you? No and no. They're not going to trade him. Chicago's not going to trade Bedard. Would I trade for Bedard? No, because whatever it's going to cost you is going to be way too much. Like, if Chicago comes to you and says, hey, we'll trade you Bedard for Michkov, I would still say no, because I get that Bedard could eventually, yes, be a number 1C. Totally get it. I really like what Michkov's game is. I really think that Michkov could end up being the best player in that draft. Is it worth a conversation? Maybe, but he's not getting moved. Almost no, I imagine no chance. Let's see. Jonathan Nesbitt, comedy over on YouTube, says, neither Kolosov or Fedotov showed that they are worth much long-term. Sign a 1A for Ersson to be 1B with. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, you're going to try to get somebody who can be the lead guy and put Ersson back into being a guy who's not relied on nearly as much. That is my guess. Says maybe Jake Allen if available. But that was actually following, what was this, about the offer sheets. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko's here. Says, nice to catch Russ Joy Show as I take the train to PA. Just left New York. Greg, have a nice ride on the choo-choo. Who doesn't love a good choo-choo ride, especially on Good Friday, you know? All right. I'm just looking to see really quickly if there's anybody else that I missed out on. Eric Wisniewski says, I want the Hershey coach. Micah London says, Russ, what's up? What is this? Not Snow the goalie. Micah, where have you been? The Russ Joy Show every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, typically at 8:30 a.m., although Wednesday's show and today's show happened in the afternoon for a whole bunch of different reasons. And just based on some of the live viewer numbers I'm seeing over 100 people across the 2 YouTube channels right now. Live right now, over 100 people just checking out this show across the Russ Joy Show channel and the Joy Media one. Well, maybe I need to move this show to the afternoon, to a lunchtime show. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, do the show 3 times a week. It's a lot of fun. Got a nice little community of people here, as you can see. On YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. John Izzy says, are you worried that Risto could revert back to his old habits if Shaw goes, and would it be in their best interest to move him? Yes and yes. See, I'm in this really weird place, right, where, like, I've never been a big Risto fan. I can acknowledge that last year, Risto had a good stretch, and then he got hurt at the end of the season, and I could also, again, acknowledge that early this season, Risto was playing the best hockey of his career, not just in Philadelphia, but ever. But then I said, like, regress to the mean, right? And then at that point you go, not ideal. This isn't good, right? And then he got hurt again. He missed the 4 Nations, and he missed the end of the Flyers season. And so big body guy, supposedly playoff Risto has been like the long-held joke. He still is yet to see the playoffs. If you can get another big body defenseman to take his place so you don't have a very small blue line through all 3 pairs, yeah, I think they should consider moving him. Will they? No idea. Rowan says, what team in the top 10 is most likely to entertain a trade with the Flyers to, I don't know what that was supposed to be. I don't know if any team is going to move out of the top 10. Again, if all right, so say that the current lottery standings play out, nobody moves. Do the Islanders at number 10, if McQueen is there, do they say, we're afraid of the injury report, and the Flyers come in and they say 3 first-round picks, 2 this year, 1 next year. Here you go. Could the Islanders look to do that? I don't know. Maybe. Does Pittsburgh look at it and say, we need a lot. We would take the picks. Maybe. Does an Anaheim say, yeah, you know what? We need a lot of picks. But I don't see it. I think it's way too high in the draft. I think in order for you to get back into the draft, you're probably looking somewhere around 15, 16. And by the way, if McQueen falls that far, then it makes me really concerned about the medical report the teams get. Let's see. Obi-Wan says, imagine if the Flyers somehow managed to get Hagens and McQueen. I'd be so fucking hyped. I just don't build your hopes up, okay? Just don't do it. But it would be awesome. If McQueen somehow falls into the teens and Danny Briere goes like big balls Briere on the table, just foom, foom, right? And that would be the kind of move that when you talk about fundamentally changing a team's trajectory, if McQueen falls into the teens and you can scoop him up in addition to whatever you get in the top 6, that is a boom or bust move. And if it doesn't work out, you've now put your neck really far out on the line. But if it does work out, you look like this. I mean, at that point, people are going to be comparing Briere to Howie. They will. If he's able to get a top 6 forward plus McQueen in this draft, and those guys end up become legitimate contributors on this team long term, they will look back to this draft as being the best one from a Flyers GM in God knows how many decades. But again, almost inconceivable it would happen. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to get to here before heading out. Superfan Eric says, Russ, thanks for making my day go better. Can we do this every day? We do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's typically at 8:30 a.m. But again, as I was mentioning before, I'm now looking at, wow, we're up to 113 people on YouTube right now, live across 2 channels. So, man, I'm starting to think that the lunchtime show might not be the worst idea in the world. Might have to think about it. Obi-Wan says, first time, bud, just subscribe. Thank you, Obi-Wan. I appreciate you very much. So here we are. Sinister checks in, just says 4th best odds. It's not a bad place. Also says does not want McQueen. So says if we already have Coots, that's enough of a back issue. Yeah, listen. I should come up with a really catchy phrase for how to get back into the first round for McQueen. It's not going to happen though. Here's my thing, right? The only thing that makes me concerned, right? You guys know where I was last year. I really believed in Ivan Demidov. I hated the run that the Flyers made late in last season, the wink-wink playoff run, right? I hated that because that ultimately costs you the ability to get in position that maybe you are able to move up a spot or two, or that you put yourself in position to hopefully draft a Demidov, and it's still very early, right? And Montreal is now in the playoffs, and we'll see what Demidov looks like. I think that Demidov has the potential to be a better forward than any of the forwards coming out of this draft. Potentially. And if you cost yourself a chance at that player because you were making that quasi-fake playoff run last year, that's one of those things you look back and go, ugh. But I'm prefer to look into the future with some optimism rather than look back at last year and feel kind of sad. Okay, so anyway. Not JD says, first time here, haven't been able to watch because it's been too early. Not JD, thank you for being here. Don't forget though, if the show is early, you can always watch it on replay on YouTube or Facebook or X or whatever. Also, the show's available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's see. Eric Wisniewski says, draft McQueen on name alone. Imagine Jim Jackson saying his name on a big hit or big goal. McQueen in the corner. No call. McQueen, he scores. I can see it. Rora says, last year on Snow the Goalie, Bundy talked about how great Hagens is. How did he fall in the first round? Bundy was hearing stuff from people within the organization a year ago that Hagens was going to be the number 1 overall pick, which in fairness, a lot of people thought this time last year that Hagens was going to be the number 1 pick or close to it. I don't know why he's falling. I don't know why, on Craig Button's board, that was the most notable one that he fell to number 6. Okay. I don't know. And will he end up getting drafted at number 6? No idea. Will he fall that far? I have no clue. Why is he falling? I don't know. But remember, there are a lot of things that happen between now and the draft, and guys' stocks are going to go up and down. And you always have that one late riser. There's always at least one guy who goes darting up draft boards because of the combine or because of God knows whatever else. So maybe there's somebody that the Flyers could end up having their eye on that as of right now isn't even being mentioned in the top 6. Who knows? John Izzy is encouraging me to keep this as a lunchtime show. Been following since the beginning of days of Snow the Goalie. Thank you, John. Let's see. Amadeo says it's the road to 1,000. I don't know. Where are we at on subscribers with this channel? It has been gaining, especially of late. We're at 893 subscribers, which I think we picked up 5 or 6 people since the start of the show, so that's cool. The drive to 1,000, the road to 1,000. There's nothing that rhymes with 1,000 that would be fun. We did the drive to 500. I need to come up with something that rhymes with 1,000. Do I do something that rhymes with mil? Because mil is 1,000 in Spanish. I don't know. What can we get to? Be real for the meal. No. Also, when we think of mil, we think of million in English, so it probably doesn't work. Let's see. Micah says the Flyers need to take a step in the offseason. They need to trade for Zegras and Gibson. Not sure who they trade. I don't think they're going to trade for Zegras. I do know that there have been different times where the Flyers have been interested in Zegras. I know that there were some thoughts that maybe Torts would not have enjoyed coaching Zegras. There are also just concerns with the drop in production and whether or not he's as good as Anaheim seems to believe he still is or could be. So you got to be really, really careful there. Sinister says, draft the Russian center with our last first-round pick. I don't know what the name is off the top of my head. Would I be opposed to them taking a Russian player that might still be under contract elsewhere? No. And in fairness, the Flyers have done a very good job of getting some Russian players over here sooner than later, so we love that. I think that's probably about where I want to go for today. So Greg Bondarenko wants me to do a poll for lunchtime versus the morning. I don't know. But I do like this. I do like all the people being here live at once. Usually in the morning, we have about like 25, 30 people, and I don't know, like 8 or 9 different people commenting at any time. This was a much different crowd today, which I love. Okay. Let's see. Josh White says the run to 1,000. There it is. Josh wins. See, that's a kid who had a good German teacher in high school. Good job, Josh. Well done. The run to 1,000. Sinister says, Russ, you should add another voice because you're at your best when you're arguing points with another hockey fan. Okay, hold on. So it's Russ argues the benefit of drafting in the top 4 with Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. All right, let's go. Actually, hold on. I'll play moderator. We'll have Trump versus Bernie. Are the Flyers better suited going for Schaefer at number 1? Should they consider McQueen? Do you take somebody else? Let's first go over to Bernie Sanders. Senator, your thoughts.
It is very important to remember that each and every player who's going to be in the top 6 of this upcoming draft deserves to have the opportunity to be taken number 1 overall. Now, will it happen? That remains to be seen. But if you are the Flyers, you have to consider who is going to be the best player at your point in the draft.
President Trump, your thoughts.
You got to get whoever the biggest and best guy is, and if it is Mr. McQueen, we love McQueen, don't we, folks? And I have my own queen. Her name is Melania. We love McQueen, and if he's there at number 6 and the Flyers are at number 6, you have to do it. You have to take him, folks, don't you? You have to take him all the way to the bank. Maybe if you're the Flyers and you get the number 1 overall pick, you take Schaefer or you take Misa. We love Misa, don't we? We also love Masa. Love a good taco, don't we, folks? We love making the tortillas ourselves. But we love Misa. We also go to Mass. We go to that as well, don't we, on Easter Sunday? We love the bunny, folks. We love he hippity-hoppities down the trail like Peter Cottontail. And people don't ask, why is it they don't lay eggs? Why do we do eggs, but we have an Easter bunny? Bunnies don't lay eggs. At least I don't believe they do. They have eggs? Do the bunnies? Does the Easter bunny, does he have eggs, folks? We don't know, but he does have a basket. He has no opposable thumbs. How does he hold the basket with all of the candy and the eggs? We will never know, folks. We'll never know about the Easter bunny, will we? But yes, that's why you take McQueen. We love McQueen. All right, I'm done. That went way too long. Okay. Although I do like now we're getting like an ego boost here with the people saying that we love McQueen. Anyway, this is the insanity of this show. So if this is your first time finding the show, this is some of the hilarity and the insanity that you get from this show. Why try to come here for objective analysis when you can hear Sanders and Trump debate who the Flyers should take in the draft? You know, that's what it's all about. Don Burr's dad says, thoughts on Bump making the team out of camp? He's going to get a legit look. He will. He'll get a look. I don't know if he's going to make the team out of camp, but I do expect him to have a long, pending injury, right? I do expect that Bump is going to have a long-term presence at camp next year. I don't think he'll be one of the first cuts. I think that he might come down to the wire. So you got that. Nuri says tariffs. How would you factor that, we love No, I'm not going to do that. Nope. I don't want to upset the Canadian people who watch the show. We don't joke about Canadian invasion on the show. We're not going to go there. But we love tariffs, don't we? Tony says, I want to see Trump versus Bundy's Hitchcock in a debate about Easter food. All right, maybe we'll get there at some point. Video Guy Amadeo says, you're making my job harder, chat. Yep. Video Guy Amadeo, you're getting to work on Good Friday. Sorry about you, fella. Aurora says, that was awesome. Sinister says, this is too much. It's just, stop. It's people being nice. It's an ego boost. I don't need that.
Okay, I don't need that, but it's nice on a Good Friday, you know? Okay. Crimson says, we have to spread the word about Russ. The world needs him. Thank you. Oh, here's the last thing really quick. Just really, really quick. I said something on Wednesday's show about like hating iPads at restaurants for kids, right? I'm just like very opposed to it. And I said on Wednesday's show, if it's a kid with special needs, with autism, sensory issues, whatever, fine. Like I defer. Those parents are going through a lot. It's a much harder existence as a parent. And so I said, like, that's okay. But if you just have like a kid who's just like doesn't fit one of those categories and you're letting them blast a game on their iPad or their iPhone in the middle of a restaurant, that like, I think that's pretty stupid. And it's also not exactly like a very nice thing to do on a human level. There were a couple of people who responded to the clips or the shorts on YouTube. And they're like, well, you're clearly not a parent. You've clearly never had to take a child to a restaurant. You clearly have no idea the sort of stress I face when I go to a restaurant with my one child. And it is so hard. And I was like, I have 4. My kids don't have iPads or iPhones at the table. They stack creamers and butters. And you know what? If there's crayons, guess what? Even the oldest ones, they also figure out ways to keep themselves entertained. Or, God forbid, talk to their family at the table. But anyway, it was funny. You've never been a parent before, have you? I'm like, oh, I have. I have 4 of them. They have aged me very much in these last few years. I once looked as though I was a 20-something-year-old. Now I'm 35, and I sometimes am confused for being in my 40s. They have added much age to me. Anyway, that's all. I think I'm done. Oh, yeah, by the way, Amadeus, like, the one that they were complaining about, I say in the short that my kids play stacking the creamers at the table. And they're like, oh, good point. Good point. Anyway, that's it for today's show. This was a long one, but on a positive note, I do appreciate all the people who found the show. If you're new to the channel and you can hit that subscribe button, it really does help. It makes a difference. Wow, we just picked up more people. We're up to 897. We're almost at 900 here. 900 subscribers by the end of the show. I like where this is going. We're going up. We're going up and up and up. So big thank you to everybody who found the show today. Any of you who are new, I appreciate you finding it. Do me a favor, like the video, share the video, subscribe. There's a nice video presence, thanks to video guy Amadeo, over on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. We're pretty much taking this thing everywhere. Russ might have a decision to make about whether or not this show is going to go to the afternoons going forward, because the last 2 shows have done a very big live viewer number relative to the usual thing in the morning. So this might have to be a conversation. I will mull it over. But as of right now, Monday's show, probably 8:30. You can check back in. Obi-Wan went from lunch to all caps lunch. We'll see. But anyway, I do want to thank everybody who joined me today. Reminder that if you like listening to shows in your podcast feed, the show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a good Friday. If you're celebrating Easter over the weekend, have a very happy Easter. I'll talk to all of you Monday here on the Russ Joy Show. Have a great weekend. Talk to each and every one of you very soon.